The radio crackled with the kind of static that meant someone was about to die. In the pre-dawn darkness over the Kandahar province, Lieutenant Colonel Nix, Raven Kowalski banked her. Thunderbolt II through a canyon so narrow that her wingtips nearly kissed the ancient rock walls. The Warthog's twin engines screamed in protest, but she kept the bird steady, invisible to radar, hunting. "Overwatch, this is Raven 17, she transmitted, her voice cutting through the white noise like a blade. "I'm 2 clicks out from your position. Paint the target." Static answered her. Then finally a voice thick with disbelief. "Raven 17, say again your call sign." Something cold settled in Nix's stomach. She'd heard that tone before, the moment when ground forces realized their close air support wasn't the grizzled male pilot they'd expected, but her. At 34, she'd logged more combat hours in the A-10 than most pilots saw in their entire careers, but the surprise in their voices never changed. "Overwatch, this is Lieutenant Colonel Kowalski, call sign Raven. I'm your CAS for this mission. Do you copy?" A pause stretched long enough for her to count 3 heartbeats on her instruments. Below, she knew 8 Navy SEALs were pinned down in a compound by insurgents with RPGs and heavy machine guns. Every second of hesitation meant American blood spilling into foreign sand. "Raven, we requested immediate air support 20 minutes ago. Where's your wingman?" "I am the immediate air support." Her jaw tightened. "And I don't need a wingman to turn your problem into a memory. Now paint that target before your boys become casualties." Through her HUD, she watched the thermal signatures of the SEAL team huddled behind crumbling walls while muzzle flashes erupted from the surrounding buildings. The insurgents had them boxed in tight, a textbook kill zone that would be a massacre within minutes. "Raven, we've got eyes on approximately 15 to 20 hostiles in fortified positions. They've got us zeroed. We need danger close support, how copy?" Nix's fingers found the master arm switch. The A-10's GAU-8 Avenger cannon was loaded with 30mm depleted uranium rounds, each one capable of punching through tank armor. In her experienced hands, the weapon became surgical precision wrapped in thunder. "Copy danger close," she replied, diving toward the deck. "Tell your boys to hug dirt and count to 10. Raven's bringing the lightning." What the SEALs didn't know was that Nix Kowalski had earned her call sign during her 3rd deployment, when she'd single-handedly destroyed an entire Taliban convoy that had ambushed a medical transport. The Ravens had circled the wreckage for days. The radio crackled with nervous tension as 8 elite warriors realized their salvation wore wings and carried a woman's voice through the darkness. Time stretched like a held breath before the storm. Her A-10 dropped below the radar horizon, a metallic predator stalking through the mountain shadows. The insurgents had no idea death was already among them, wearing American colors and flying on borrowed time. In 60 seconds, they would learn why the Warthog was called a tank killer. But first, she had to prove herself all over again. The mission parameters were simple: get in, eliminate the threat, get out. The execution would be anything but simple. Nix had flown support missions for SEALs before, but never with this kind of radio silence stretching between her first transmission and their acknowledgement. She could practically hear them processing the cognitive dissonance. Their requested air support had arrived in the form of a woman whose reputation preceded her like the roar of twin turbofans. "Overwatch lead, this is Bravo 6, came a new voice, older and steadier. "We're marking target building with infrared strobe. 3-story structure, northwest corner of the compound. Hostiles are dug in with crew-served weapons." Finally, a professional who cared more about staying alive than his preconceptions. "Copy, Bravo 6. I have your strobe. Confirm you need the northwest building serviced." "Affirmative, Raven. But be advised, we've got potential civilians in the adjacent structures. This needs to be surgical." Nix allowed herself a grim smile. Surgical was her specialty. The A-10 might look like a flying tank, but in the right hands, it could thread a needle. She'd once put a 30mm round through a window to take out a sniper while leaving the family sleeping in the room below completely unharmed. Bravo 6 understands civilians in adjacent buildings. I'm going to make one low pass for visual confirmation, then come around for gun run. Keep your heads down. The Warthog dropped to 300 feet, skimming the compound like a mechanical vulture. Through her targeting pod, Nix counted muzzle flashes, identified weapon positions, calculated angles of attack. The insurgents had chosen their position well, high ground with overlapping fields of fire and stone walls thick enough to stop small arms. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd never faced an A-10 pilot who treated precision targeting like an art form. Visual confirmation, Bravo 6. I count 14 hostiles in the target building, 2 crew-served weapons on the roof, machine gun nest in the northwest window. Civilians appear clear. Setting up for my run now. She pulled the aircraft into a climbing turn, feeling the G-forces press her into her ejection seat. The A-10 wasn't pretty, wasn't fast, wasn't glamorous, but it was tough as a coffin nail and accurate as divine judgment. The aircraft had been built around its gun. Everything else was just there to get the GAU-8 to the fight. Raven, you're cleared hot. Repeat, cleared hot. Copy, cleared hot. Banking into her attack run, Nix felt the familiar calm settle over her. This was where she lived, in the space between chaos and control, where split-second decisions separated heroes from headlines. The insurgents below had no idea they were about to meet a pilot who'd graduated top of her class from weapons school, who'd flown more than 200 combat missions, who'd been personally recommended for the Distinguished Flying Cross by a general who'd watched her work. The A-10's nose dropped toward the target like the finger of an angry god. The targeting reticle settled on the northwest building with the steady precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Nix's breathing slowed, her heart rate dropping into the zone where muscle memory took over and conscious thought became passenger to trained instinct. Through her heads-up display, she watched the thermal signatures of the insurgents shift and move behind their stone barriers, unaware that death was diving toward them at 300 knots. Guns, 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 she transmitted, her voice steady as bedrock. The GAU-8 Avenger erupted to life with a sound like the earth splitting. 65 rounds per second of depleted uranium death streamed from the 7-barrel rotary cannon, each projectile guided by Nix's precise hand on the stick. The stone walls that had protected the insurgents dissolved like sand castles, and the crew-served weapons that had pinned down the seals simply ceased to exist. The gun run lasted exactly 2.3 seconds. When the smoke cleared, the northwest corner of the building had been surgically removed while the adjacent structures remained untouched. Bravo 6 Raven, target neutralized, how copy? The radio remained silent for a long moment. Then, Jesus Christ, Raven, that was beautiful. We're moving to secure the area. For the first time since arriving on station, Nix allowed herself to exhale fully. But she kept the A-10 in a lazy orbit above the compound, her eyes scanning for threats. The mission wasn't over until every American was safely out of the kill zone. Raven, Bravo 6, we're clear of immediate threat. Unknown number of hostiles still in the area, but you've broken their back. Outstanding shooting. Copy, Bravo 6. I'll maintain overwatch while you extract. What she didn't tell them was that she'd been holding her breath too. Not from nerves, she'd left those behind somewhere over Iraq during her second deployment, but from the weight of expectation that came with every mission. Every time she strapped into the cockpit, she carried the hopes and doubts of every person who questioned whether a woman could handle the stick of a warthog in combat. The answer was always the same, better than most, and with more precision than any of them expected. Below, she watched the SEAL team move through the compound with practiced efficiency, clearing rooms and securing the area. Their radio chatter had changed tone completely, professional respect replacing the earlier skepticism. She'd heard this transformation before, but it never got old. Raven, we're finding intelligence materials in the target building. Going to need additional time for exploitation. Copy, I've got plenty of fuel. Take your time, Bravo 6. The A-10 continued its lazy circle above the compound. A mechanical guardian angel with armor-piercing teeth and eyes that could see in the dark. 20 minutes later, the extraction call came through clean and professional. Raven, Bravo 6, we're clear and moving to extract. Thanks for the cover. Bravo 6 Raven, it's been a pleasure. Stay safe out there. As her A-10 climbed toward the pre-dawn sky, Nix reflected on the mission. Clean execution, 0 casualties, intelligence gathered, enemy neutralized. By the numbers, it was just another successful close air support mission. But she knew that 8 Navy SEALs would go back to their base with a story about the female pilot who'd saved their lives with surgical precision and professional calm. The radio crackled one more time. Raven, this is Bravo 6 Actual. Go ahead, Bravo 6 Actual. That was some of the finest shooting I've seen in 15 years of special operations. You ever want to trade that A-10 for a Trident, you let me know. Nix smiled behind her oxygen mask. I appreciate that, Bravo 6 Actual, but somebody's got to keep you ground pounders out of trouble. Laughter echoed through the radio, and she knew she'd earned something more valuable than commendations or recognition. She'd earned respect, one perfectly placed round at a time. The sun was beginning to paint the eastern horizon with shades of gold and crimson as Nix turned her Warthog toward home base. The A-10's engines settled into their steady cruise rhythm, carrying her away from another successful mission and toward whatever challenge waited next. In the distance, she could see the lights of Bagram Airfield twinkling like earthbound stars. Home, at least for now, where she'd land, refuel, rearm, and prepare to do it all again tomorrow. Because this was what she did, this was who she was. Lieutenant Colonel Nix, Raven Kowalski, United States Air Force. Pilot, warrior, and the woman who turned skepticism into respect one mission at a time. The flight back to Bagram gave Nix time to decompress, to let her heart rate return to normal, and her mind process the mission details for the after-action report. The A-10 cruised steadily through the clear morning air, its battle-scarred skin reflecting the early sunlight like worn armor. She'd been flying this particular aircraft, tail number 810965, for 6 months, and they developed the kind of relationship that only existed between pilot and machine when both had been tested in combat. The radio was quiet except for routine air traffic control transmissions, giving her space to think. The mission had been textbook perfect, but she knew the real story would be told in the conversations that happened after she landed. Word would spread through the base about the female A-10 pilot who'd laid out a SEAL team with surgical precision, and tomorrow's mission briefings would include her name mentioned with the kind of casual respect usually reserved for male pilots with twice her flight hours. Bagram Tower, Raven 17, 15 miles out for landing. Raven 17, Bagram Tower, winds 270 at 8, altimeter 3015. Cleared straighten approach runway 21. Cleared straighten 21, Raven 17. The landing was smooth, the A-10's rugged landing gear absorbing the impact with barely a shudder. As she taxied toward the flight line, Nix could see her crew chief, Technical Sergeant Maria Santos, waiting beside the parking spot with a ground crew and a fuel truck. Santos had been working A-10s for 12 years and could diagnose problems by the sound of the engines alone. After shutdown, Nix climbed down from the cockpit to find Santos conducting her post-flight inspection, with the meticulous care of a mother checking her child for scrapes after a playground adventure. "How'd she handle, ma'am?" Santos asked, running her hands along the gun barrel housing. "Like a dream, Maria. Put about 60 rounds downrange, everything functioned perfectly." Santos nodded with satisfaction. The A-10 was her baby, and she took personal pride in every successful mission. I'll have her refueled and rearmed within the hour. Maintenance says your replacement parts for the navigation system should be here tomorrow. Outstanding. Any word on the mission schedule for today? Colonel Bradford wants to see you in his office after you debrief. Says it's routine, but he had that look. Nix knew the look Santos meant. Colonel Bradford, the squadron commander, had that particular expression when he was either about to deliver very good news or very bad news, and the recipient never knew which until the door closed behind them. The debrief went smoothly. Intelligence officers asked detailed questions about target identification, civilian presence, and battle damage assessment. Nix provided precise answers backed by gun camera footage and detailed notes from her kneeboard cards. Professional, thorough, unexciting, exactly the way a successful mission should be documented. An hour later, she found herself standing outside Colonel Bradford's office, still wearing her flight suit and trying to guess whether she was about to be congratulated or reprimanded. Colonel Marcus Bradford had been flying fighters for 22 years, most of them in various combat theaters. He'd commanded the squadron for 18 months and had quickly gained a reputation for caring more about mission effectiveness than Air Force politics. When Nix knocked on his door, he looked up from a stack of paperwork with the expression Santos had warned her about. "Come in, Raven, have a seat." She settled into the chair across from his desk, maintaining the relaxed alertness of a pilot ready for anything. Bradford studied her for a moment before speaking, and when he did, his voice carried the weight of command authority mixed with something that might have been paternal pride. "I just got off the phone with the SEAL team commander you supported this morning. He wanted to pass along his personal thanks, and he specifically requested that you be assigned to any future missions his teams might need air support for." Nix felt a small surge of satisfaction but kept her expression neutral. "I'm glad the mission went well, sir." "It went better than well, Lieutenant Colonel. It went perfectly. 0 friendly casualties, complete target destruction, minimal collateral damage, and intelligence recovered that's already proving valuable." Bradford leaned back in his chair. "That SEAL commander has been in special operations for 15 years. He's seen a lot of pilots, worked with a lot of close air support. He told me your gun run was the most precise he's ever witnessed." "The A-10's a precision instrument, sir, and Sergeant Santos keeps my aircraft in perfect condition." Bradford smiled slightly. "Don't deflect, Raven. You earned this recognition." He pulled a folder from his desk drawer. "Which brings me to why I wanted to see you. I've been tasked with recommending an officer for a special assignment. Classified, high visibility, the kind of thing that can make or break a career." Nix felt her pulse quicken, but she kept her voice steady. "What kind of assignment, sir?" "The kind I can't discuss until you tell me whether you're interested. But I will say this. It would involve extended combat operations, working with Special Operations Forces, and demonstrating the capabilities of the A-10 platform to some very important people who are currently questioning its continued place in the Air Force inventory." The implications hit her immediately. The A-10 program had been under political pressure for years, with budget-conscious politicians and technology-obsessed generals arguing that the venerable warthog was obsolete in modern warfare. If someone was looking for a pilot to demonstrate the aircraft's continued relevance, they were looking for someone who could make believers out of skeptics. "Sir, I'd be honored to be considered for any assignment that keeps A-10s in the fight." Bradford nodded, as if her answer had confirmed something he'd already suspected. "I thought you might say that. The paperwork will take a few weeks to process, but I wanted to give you a heads up. This assignment would mean leaving the squadron, probably for 6 to 8 months. It would also mean operating in challenging environments." "Understood, sir." "Good. In the meantime, keep doing what you're doing. And Raven," he looked up from the folder, "that was exceptional work this morning, the kind of flying that reminds people why we do this job." As Nix walked back to the squadron-ready room, She found herself wondering what kind of assignment would require demonstrating A-10 capabilities to important people in challenging environments. Whatever it was, she knew she was ready for it. The morning's mission had been just another day at the office, but apparently it had also been an audition for something bigger. The ready room was buzzing with the usual post-mission energy when she walked in. Pilots clustered around coffee makers, discussing weather, maintenance issues, and the eternal military staples of food and sleep. But conversations quieted slightly when she entered, and she caught several meaningful glances between her squadron mates. "Raven," Captain Jake Hammer Morrison called out from the corner where he was updating the mission board. "Heard you put on a clinic for some special operations boys this morning." "Just another day keeping the ground pounders alive, Hammer." "Right." He grinned and turned back to the board, but not before she caught the respect in his expression. Morrison had been initially skeptical when she joined the squadron, but 6 months of watching her fly had converted him into one of her strongest supporters. The rest of the day passed in the familiar rhythm of military aviation: paperwork, maintenance coordination, mission planning, and the 100 small tasks that kept a combat squadron operational. But underneath the routine, Nix found herself thinking about Colonel Bradford's mysterious assignment and what it might mean for her career and the future of the A-10 program. That evening, as she sat in her quarters writing a letter to her sister back in Montana, she reflected on the morning's mission and the chain of events it might have set in motion. 8 Navy SEALs had called for air support, and she'd answered the call with precision and professionalism. Now, somehow, that routine act of doing her job well had opened a door to something new and unknown. Outside her window, she could hear the distant sound of aircraft engines as the night shift prepared for their missions. The war continued around the clock, and somewhere in the darkness, other pilots were strapping into their cockpits to answer other calls for help. Tomorrow would bring new missions, new challenges, new opportunities to prove herself all over again. But tonight, she was content to sit quietly and remember the satisfaction of a perfect gun run and the respect in a SEAL commander's voice. Lieutenant Colonel Nix, Raven Kowalski, United States Air Force. Still flying, still fighting, still turning skepticism into respect one mission at a time. 3 weeks after the SEAL mission, Nix found herself standing in a secure briefing room at Bagram, facing a collection of officers she'd never seen before. The room's windowless walls were covered with maps of Afghanistan, Iraq, and several other countries whose names were blacked out on the charts. At the head of the table sat a brigadier general she didn't recognize, flanked by colonels wearing the distinctive green berets of Army Special Forces and the Naval Special Warfare insignia of the SEAL teams. "Lieutenant Colonel Kowalski," the general began, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "I'm Brigadier General Patricia Hayes, and I'm here to discuss an opportunity that will either make your career or end it. Please, have a seat." Nix settled into the indicated chair, her mind racing through possibilities. General Hayes was a legend in special operations circles, the first woman to command a special operations aviation regiment, with a reputation for impossible missions and zero tolerance for failure. 3 weeks ago, you provided close air support to a SEAL reconnaissance team. The mission commander's after-action report described your performance as surgical precision under fire and specifically requested you for future operations. Hayes consulted a thick folder. That recommendation, combined with your service record and Colonel Bradford's assessment, has brought you to my attention. The general stood and moved to a map of Afghanistan, her finger tracing a route through mountain, passes that Nix recognized as some of the most dangerous terrain in the country. "For the past year, we've been losing special operations teams in this region. High-value targets, time-sensitive operations, the kind of missions that can't afford to fail. The problem isn't our ground forces, it's close air support. We need precision, reliability, and pilots who can operate in conditions that would ground most aircraft. Nix felt a chill of anticipation. This was clearly leading somewhere significant. The A-10 program is under review, Hayes continued. Politicians and Pentagon officials are arguing that it's obsolete, too slow, too vulnerable to modern air defenses. They want to replace close air support with drones and multi-role fighters. She turned back to face Nix. I disagree, but disagreeing isn't enough. I need proof. One of the colonels, wearing SEAL insignia, leaned forward. Colonel Kowalski, I'm Colonel James Mitchell. My teams have been operating in high-threat environments for 20 years, and I've never seen close air support like what you provided 3 weeks ago. General Hayes is putting together a special task force to demonstrate A-10 capabilities in scenarios that would be impossible for other aircraft. The mission parameters are classified, Hayes said, but I can tell you this: you'd be operating alone, providing close air support to special operations teams conducting missions that officially don't exist. High-threat environments, minimal backup, maximum scrutiny. Success could save the A-10 program. Failure, she shrugged. Failure would confirm every criticism of the aircraft and probably end your career. The room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning system. Nix studied the faces around the table, seeing the weight of expectation and the calculating assessment of whether she was capable of handling what they were proposing. General, what exactly would this assignment entail? 6 months of operations across multiple theaters. You'd be temporarily assigned to a classified special operations unit, flying missions that push both you and your aircraft to the absolute limits. The opposition would include advanced surface-to-air missiles, sophisticated radar systems, and enemy forces specifically trained to counter American air power. Colonel Mitchell added, the ground teams you'd be supporting are hand-picked operators conducting missions that could change the strategic balance in this region. There's no margin for error, no room for hesitation, and no backup plan if things go wrong. Nix felt the familiar calm settling over her, the same mental state that had carried her through 200 combat missions. This was what she'd been training for her entire career. The opportunity to prove that skill and determination mattered more than politics and preconceptions. When would I start? General Hayes smiled for the first time since the briefing began. Is that a yes, Colonel? Yes, ma'am, it's a yes. Outstanding. You'll begin mission-specific training in 2 weeks. Your aircraft will be modified with specialized equipment, and you'll be working with some of the most experienced special operations forces in the military. Hayes closed the folder and looked directly at Nix. Colonel, I'm going to be perfectly clear about what we're asking of you. This assignment will test every skill you've developed, every lesson you've learned, every limit you thought you had. You'll be flying alone into situations where the smallest mistake could cost American lives. I understand, ma'am. Do you? Because once you're committed to this assignment, there's no backing out. You'll complete the mission or you'll die trying. Those are the only 2 options. Nix met the general's gaze without flinching. General, I didn't join the Air Force to fly safe missions. I joined to protect American lives and serve my country. If this assignment serves those purposes, then I'm ready for whatever it requires. General Hayes nodded slowly. I thought you might say that. Colonel Mitchell, she's all yours for mission planning. Colonel Kowalski, report to Building 47 at 600 tomorrow. You'll begin your introduction to a world that doesn't officially exist. As the briefing concluded and the officers filed out, Nix remained seated for a moment, processing what she just committed to. 6 months of classified missions, flying alone into high-threat environments, with the future of the A-10 program potentially hanging in the balance. She thought about the morning 3 weeks ago when she'd responded to a routine call for close air support. That mission had been perfect, but it had also been the opening movement of something much larger and more dangerous. Standing up, she straightened her flight suit and headed for the door. Tomorrow would begin her preparation for missions that officially didn't exist, supporting operations that couldn't fail, flying an aircraft that politicians wanted to retire. It was exactly the kind of challenge she'd been waiting for her entire career. Building 47 turned out to be a nondescript concrete structure on the edge of Bagram Airfield, surrounded by razor wire and guarded by soldiers who checked Nix's identification with the thoroughness of people protecting national secrets. Inside, she found herself in a world that operated by different rules than the conventional military she'd known for the past 14 years. The briefing room looked like something from a spy movie: high-definition monitors displaying satellite imagery, computer workstations with multiple screens, and maps marked with symbols she didn't recognize. At the center of it all stood Colonel Mitchell, now wearing civilian clothes instead of his dress uniform. "Welcome to the real war, Colonel Kowalski," he said without preamble. "Everything you've done up to this point has been practice. This is where we find out what you're really made of." Over the next 4 hours, Nix received an education in a conflict she'd never known existed. Behind the public face of Operation Enduring Freedom, a shadow war was being fought by small teams of specialists conducting missions that would never appear in newspaper headlines or congressional reports. "Your primary mission," Mitchell explained, pointing to a satellite image of a mountain valley, "will be supporting direct action raids against high-value targets that conventional forces can't reach. These aren't the Taliban fighters you've been dealing with. These are professionally trained foreign operatives with advanced weapons and sophisticated tactics." The intelligence briefer, a woman who introduced herself only as Sarah, pulled up a series of photographs showing missile systems that made Nix's blood run cold. Russian-supplied SA-15 Gauntlet surface-to-air missiles, Chinese HQ-7 systems, and Iranian-modified SA-6 Gainful missiles, all operated by personnel trained in Russian and Chinese military academies. "The terrain doesn't help," Mitchell continued. "Narrow valleys, unpredictable weather, mountains that reach above 14,000 feet. Your A-10 will be operating in conditions it was never designed for, against threats it was never intended to face." Nick studied the intelligence displays, her mind automatically calculating approach angles, escape routes, and weapon employment zones. The challenges were significant but not impossible, assuming her aircraft performed exactly as specified and she made no mistakes. "What kind of ground forces will I be supporting?" 12-man teams combining SEALs, Army Special Forces, and CIA paramilitary officers. Each team member has at least 10 years of special operations experience. They'll be conducting raids, reconnaissance, and direct action missions based on intelligence that comes from sources I can't discuss. Sarah pulled up another screen showing communication protocols and authentication codes. "You'll be operating under radio silence most of the time, using predetermined signals and coded transmissions. If you're shot down, there will be no search and rescue missions. You'll be on your own until the team you're supporting can reach you, assuming they're in a position to help." The weight of that statement settled over the room like a physical presence. Nix had always known that combat flying involved risk, but she'd also always known that the entire American military machine would mobilize to rescue a downed pilot. This assignment came with no such guarantee. "How many missions are we talking about?" she asked. "Minimum of 20, probably closer to 30 over 6 months. Each one will be planned and executed as if it's the most important mission of the war, because it very well might be." Mitchell walked to a secure safe and withdrew a thick envelope sealed with red tape. "These are your specific mission parameters and rules of engagement. You'll memorize every detail, then return the documents to this safe. Nothing leaves this room, nothing gets discussed outside this building." "Understood." "There's one more thing," Sarah said, her expression becoming even more serious. "The enemy knows about you. They've been monitoring our communications, studying our tactics, learning from our previous operations. They know that American close air support is critical to special operations success, and they've developed specific countermeasures designed to neutralize A-10 attacks. What kind of countermeasures? Coordinated surface-to-air missile ambushes, electronic warfare systems designed to disrupt your targeting equipment, and deception operations intended to lure you into kill zones. Sarah paused. They've also placed bounties on American pilots, with special emphasis on A-10 drivers. Mitchell nodded grimly. This isn't just about proving the A-10's capabilities, Colonel. This is about survival in an environment where the enemy has specifically prepared to kill you. Nix felt the familiar calm descending, the mental state that had carried her through every dangerous situation in her military career. The mission parameters were clear, the risks were understood, and the stakes couldn't be higher. When do I start training? Tomorrow, 500. You'll begin with modified aircraft systems, then move to threat recognition and evasion tactics. After that, you'll conduct practice missions with special operations teams in controlled environments. Mitchell's expression softened slightly. Colonel, I want you to understand something. The men you'll be supporting have volunteered for missions that most people would consider suicide. They're trusting you to keep them alive when everything goes wrong. They won't be disappointed. I hope not, because if they are, none of us will be coming home. The next morning, Nick stood on the flight line looking at an A-10 that had been modified beyond recognition. The familiar twin-engine profile was still there, but nearly everything else had been changed. Additional armor plating covered critical systems, new electronic countermeasures pods hung from external hardpoints, and the cockpit had been fitted with displays and controls she'd never seen before. She's beautiful, isn't she? Technical Sergeant Santos appeared at her elbow, grinning with the pride of someone who'd spent weeks perfecting every detail. Upgraded targeting systems, enhanced survivability equipment, and enough firepower to level a small city. How much of this is classified? All of it. This aircraft officially doesn't exist, and neither do the missions you'll be flying. Santos ran her hand along the modified gun housing. But I can tell you this, she's the most advanced close air support platform ever built. If you can't complete the mission in this bird, it can't be done. Over the following weeks, Nix immersed herself in training that pushed both her and the aircraft to their limits. She learned to evade missile systems that could track her through mountains and clouds, to identify threats that disguised themselves as civilian structures, and to deliver precision strikes while maneuvering through terrain that would challenge a helicopter pilot. The special operations teams she trained with were unlike any soldiers she'd worked with before. They moved with the fluid precision of people who'd spent years learning to kill efficiently and silently. Their radio communications were minimal, their mission planning was exhaustive, and their expectations of air support were absolute. Remember, Colonel Mitchell told her during one briefing, these teams are conducting missions that could prevent terrorist attacks on American soil. The intelligence they gather, the targets they eliminate, the operations they disrupt, all of it serves a larger strategic purpose that you may never fully understand. As her training progressed, Nix began to appreciate the scope of what she'd committed to. This wasn't just about proving the A-10's capabilities or advancing her own career. She was becoming part of a shadow war fought by people whose names would never appear in history books, whose sacrifices would never be publicly acknowledged. The weight of that responsibility should have been overwhelming. Instead, she found it energizing. This was why she'd become a pilot, why she dedicated her life to military service. Not for recognition or glory, but to protect American lives and serve a cause larger than herself. 3 weeks into training, she received her first mission assignment. As she read the classified briefing documents, she realized that everything she'd done in her career had been preparation for this moment. The real war was about to begin. The mission briefing took place at 300 in a secure facility that Nix had never seen before, located in a section of Bagram that didn't appear on any official maps. Colonel Mitchell stood before a massive screen displaying satellite imagery of a mountain valley that looked like something from another planet, jagged peaks, narrow defiles, and terrain so hostile that it seemed designed to kill aircraft. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mitchell began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute seriousness, "this is Operation Nightfall. Intelligence indicates that a high-value target will be present at coordinates that I'm about to show you. The target is a foreign intelligence operative who has been coordinating attacks against American forces for the past 18 months." The screen shifted to show a compound built into the side of a mountain, accessible only by a single winding road that could be easily defended. Nick studied the imagery with the professional assessment of a pilot calculating approach angles and escape routes under fire. The ground team will consist of 8 operators from SEAL Team 6 and